irrespective of what the rest of the world does, India must reduce its tariffs. And I think what will happen globally is, I mean, your top line tariff is 125 or 145 or whatever the posturing is tomorrow, but it'll be like license permit Raj, right? So you'll have an extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you'll start working in all the exceptions. You already have stuff for semiconductors and pharma. So we'll go back to a very cronyist way of doing things, and you'll have to strike deals one by one. But still the signal you got to send to the world when it comes to inputs, and the signal to your own manufacturers so that they have export competitiveness, is to have low certain tariffs. So my advice to policymakers in India is pick a number. It should ideally be a single digit, preferably low, but maybe a high single digit number across the board for most things.
All right. So we'll now do, given the time constraint, a rapid fire round, half a minute each. So the question now is, what is the pain threshold that each society has to deal with the consequences of what's playing out? So Evans, what is going to be the pain threshold for US and for the Trump administration?
It's not knowable because it's really a political question, not an economic question. And, most people thought the president reversed course because of the bond market. So you could say that's the pain point. But of course, then the president came out the next day and said, oh, the bond market had nothing to do with it. So if the bond market had nothing to do with it, then number one, why'd he do it? But number two, it means he's oblivious to what's happening when bond yields explode. That's a problem in and of itself. So I think the answer to the question is going to be political. And it's going to be, at what point does the administration generally and the president personally think they're paying a price with the electorate? And the administration doesn't really care about most of the electorate. It's the part of the electorate that is most supportive of them. And that's not farmers and ranchers, because we discovered what happened last time was farmers and ranchers paid a big price, and they went out and voted for him again anyway, twice more. So it's other parts of the electorate that are not the MAGA base, but that made the difference for him. So I would watch kind of reactions to inflation, consumer behavior, and the bond market, because the advisors care about it. But I really think it's a political question, not an economic one, and it's entirely domestic in the United States.
No, sure. So Rosa, given the political churning in Europe, what will be the pain threshold in Europe to push back on tariffs and other trade measures from the US?
Yeah, I mean, politics in Europe are volatile, and I could spend the next hour talking about that. But that is one problem. And of course, it can happen in a major country that there is a volatile political situation, and that could upend the whole of the EU response. But the other thing really is Europe's economy is not in good shape. And in this context, Europe needs to really double down on deepening the single market to make it attractive for global markets. And that's not an easy task. It's been on the cards for a long time, and there have been a lot of political obstacles to creating a banking union, to creating a capital markets union, but that is actually what's needed to make sure that Europe's economy can compete with these challenges.
Okay. And beyond, how do you see China's capacity to bear pain and push back? As one of the Chinese statements said, fight till the end.
Exactly. No, yeah, and that points to exactly the right factor here. I mean, if you start your day like I do, kind of reading Chinese newspapers, you discover the language is enormously strong on kind of sacrifice that needs to be made, endurance, kind of to win that fight, and kind of really kind of also kind of mobilizing public opinion around that. And I think it kind of on balance with China's ability to do that and kind of creating a very high pain threshold in the population, I think China has an asset there, kind of on balance over kind of an advantage perhaps over others, but also not unlimited, because COVID crisis has shown there is also limits to pain thresholds also in the Chinese population.
Ashley, so do you see India needing to bear pain or use this moment to carry out some needed changes and, in a way, charm President Trump into accommodating India's needs?
Well, I hope that India follows Shruti's advice, because I think for its own sake, a lower tariff rate is in India's own interest. But I think in the bilateral space, we are going to have a test very, very quickly. because India is essentially putting on the table large concessions on merchandise. The US, if it provides a reciprocal concessions, so suppose we have reciprocal negotiation. If it provides reciprocal concessions, it will probably be at the tail end of the process. So in a sense, we're asking India to bear costs upfront while we provide benefits downstream. Now, will the politics in this country permit that? Will Indian exporters and Indian business tolerate that kind of a solution? Is the Prime Minister willing to take the political costs of selling that? These are going to be very big questions and not easy questions.
So you're saying be patient and come out a winner at the end.
Well, you have to come out a winner soon if this deal is to stick to begin with. But even apart from the deal, as Shruti said, you make these decisions for your own sake and not simply because we are turning the heat on you.
All right. And Shruti, final word to you. Half a minute. What's your advice to everyone? How to bring the world to sanity?
I think of pain threshold in terms of GDP per capita. We should not be delusional. We are at about 2,200. China is 6 times richer than us. South Korea is about 15 times richer than us. EU is about 30 times richer than us. And the United States is about 33 times richer than us. So that's the pain threshold. We have 1 billion people living at sub-Saharan levels on food rations. I don't think there is much room in India to play around and deal with this, few months at a time. India just needs to do broad-based reforms for its export competitiveness. And I doubt there's any way out of it at this point.
Thank you. So I think the takeaway from this is we are all in for a wild ride. We don't know what's going to happen. Hang in there. It will eventually work out. So thank you very much. So thank you very much. And I request all of you to give the panel a big hand because they stepped up at the last minute.
Thank you, dear speakers. May I request the audience to please settle down? Our next panel is... Our next panel is very aptly titled Guardians of the Galaxy, Space Security Norms and Partnerships. For this, I have the honor of welcoming to the stage Marjolijn van Deelen, Space Envoy, Special Envoy for Space, European External Action Service, my apologies, Ambassador Anupam Ray, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of India to the Conference on Disarmament, welcome sir, and Anirudh Sharma, Chief Executive Officer, Digantara. Moderating this session is Konak Bandari, Fellow Technology and Society Program, Carnegie, India. Can I have the video, please? Over to you, Konak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel on space security norms and partnerships. So, we're on the cusp of a new space race, and some people might say we're already in the middle of a space race. This new space race is essentially marked by increasing collaboration and also competition among private space actors, but nations as well. We're also seeing increasing focus on certain areas, for example, lunar resource extraction. We're looking at outer space, deep space exploration, and also commercial space tourism as well. So those are some areas which we're looking at increasingly in this new era of space race. This is noticeably distinct from when we look at the previous space eras, which were there in the Cold War, which was marked by projects of national prestige. This is a bit different now. So essentially, we're seeing a buildup of space assets because the new space race is marked largely by commercial prospects, commercial considerations, and economic growth. So we're seeing the buildup of space assets in a big way. Now, these space assets are essentially, dual use in nature. They also have civilian purpose, but they also have a military application as well. And so they can also be used for hostile reasons as well. So going ahead, we're seeing now these space assets being integrated into the space arsenal of major space economies, but we're also seeing them become integral to the carrying of the statecraft as well. So essentially what this means is that we're on the cusp of astropolitics, which is increasing geopolitical contestation in space. And what that has led to is that we're seeing the potential for escalation of conflict in space as well. At the same time, we're seeing an increasing commercialization as well. So a lot of private space entrepreneurs have essentially developed space technologies in a rapid way. And as usual, as is the case, we have seen how sort of the law struggles to keep pace with the technology. And so international space law norms have still not clearly defined the contours of how do we sort of go about looking at this new space tech. So this panel is essentially going to be about looking at, where do we stand on space security? What role do multilateral norms have when it comes to sort of looking at space security? What are the areas of differences as well between all the nations as well? And number two, we'll also look at the role of private space, like all the private space entrepreneurs, private space enterprise, when it comes to this area as well. So with that, the first question, I'd like to go to Ambassador Van Deelen. Ambassador Van Deelen, I wanted to know a little bit about the EU vantage point on space security and the correlation that has with the space safety, sustainability. We are seeing increasingly a large amount of cybersecurity attack on satellites. We're seeing, rendezvous and proximity operations being also happening. So the point is that space, which was supposed to be a global commons, a safe space, is not that safe anymore. So the EU has also, increasingly acknowledged this. They've come out with a strategy in 2023 when it comes to, I think, space security and defense. So where is the EU exactly on this topic of space security? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Konark, and thanks very much for having me. It's really a great pleasure to be in this fantastic conference. Indeed, as you say, the EU realized some 4 years ago that space is a strategic domain. Before that, we were very much focused on the civilian use of a civilian space program. The EU space program, Galileo, Copernicus, they're very well-known entities, and they were designed to be free, full, and open. And that world no longer is. We've came to realize that by deciding jointly with the 27 member states that we see space as a strategic domain. Out of that landmark realization came the strategy you mentioned. It came out in 2023, which is a strategy for space security and defense. So very much separate from what we do on the civilian side with the EU space program that is managed by the European Commission. And this strategy has 5 pillars. I'll briefly go through them. The first of them is to have a common understanding between EU member states of the threats that we face in space. And we do that in a classified way together with the services of our member states. We have a space threat landscape, so to make sure we have a common understanding of what we face. And what you mentioned is, of course, very much visible on that. It's the cyber, it's the potential use of RPOs, but it's also ASATs, which create a lot of debris and which could target our satellites. It's also a lack of transparency by some actors that doesn't give us confidence. So that's a starting point. Second element is the resilience and protection of the EU space program. So this very much relates to making sure we have launch capacities, that we have a vibrant industry, and also that we can develop future programs. Third one is related to our response to space threats. In order to respond, you need to be able to detect a threat, to characterize it, and then to also attribute before you can do a diplomatic response. EU being a civilian organization, we would always have a civilian response, a diplomatic response. Any military activity, if there were any, it will be through member states, but not through the EU as an organization. Then fourth is the use of space for security and defense. As I said, the programs in the past have been very much designed for civilian use. We know that security actors and defense actors make use of the data, but those were not designed for them. So we're working to get user requirements for military organizations in the EU and also civil protection organizations. And we've already embarked on 2 new elements of the EU space program. One is governmental SATCOM, the Iris Square program, for which the contract was signed last December. And we're working on a pilot for an Earth observation governmental service. So that is really also a deviation from the past. And the fifth one is partnering for norms, rules, and principles of responsible behavior. Because the normative basis that we have is too limited, and we really feel we need to work in the UN context in order to make sure that we have international agreements on how to keep space secure, and we do that together with our partners. So priority for us is now to implement the strategy. This is one thing of getting there with 27 member states. So we now is focus on the implementation, and for me in particular, it's on the normative side and it's on the partner side.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Ray, if I may come to you for a second. The UN has remained the forum for any multilateral debate on space safety and security. How do you look at the way India has viewed the discussions which have happened at the UN level, and how has India participated in those same discussions?
Thank you, Konak. Firstly, thank you to Rudra and to Carnegie India for organizing this and for inviting us. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Venkatesh Verma somewhere in the audience. He's been a mentor to me and to many of us in this field. And very privileged to be on the panel with Mario, and the EU is one of our most important partners. And to someone like Anirudh, the future of India and my pension depend on how well he does as a space startup. The regulatory conversation on space at the international level is a very old one. At the current moment, the only regulatory framework is a cluster of treaties and understandings built around something called the Outer Space Treaty, which was negotiated in 1967. In 1967, there were 400 objects in space. And this was about 7 or 8 years after Sputnik. The entire use of space was for military purposes. Civilian use of space only came later. Today we have 30,000 objects, in space. Any number of say what we call space junk, lots of debris. The number of space launches is at an unprecedented high. The cost of space launch has come down by 90%. Satellites today are small satellites, and you have constellations. So what it does is that it creates a regulatory challenge which the OST is inadequate to tackle. Now, since the origins of space of all space programs are, excepting the Indian one, I must add, are essentially military in nature. So the OST is a very peculiar treaty. When it came up in 1967, 14 of its provisions of its 17 articles are more or less drawn from the Antarctica Treaty. Okay, and the rest of them have some WMD, weapons of mass destruction obligations. Today, in space, you have thousands of satellites. Many of them are dual use. Okay, civilian space use has exploded. Space capacity is not universal. There are about 190 countries in the world. About a dozen have any meaningful space capacity, in the sense that they have all the verticals of space capacity: launch, satellite fabrication, satellite operation, satellite applications, and SSA. So there are multiple conversations going on. How do you reconcile the military aspects with the civilian aspects? the space economy today is about according to McKinsey, about $630 billion. It's expected to go up to around $2 trillion in the next 10 years. When the Outer Space Treaty came up, there was no possibility of, say, asteroid mining, of human habitation in space, manufacturing in space, energy production in space. Okay, and these are very real possibilities now. So how do you reconcile these two? So the Indian approach is that we participate in these conversations. We are conscious of the fact that we would like to, that we have space ambition, and we have the record in some ways of say, how would I say, of delivering on many of these aspirations in space. A number of conversations are underway, but broadly they can be divided into what we call the Geneva track and the Vienna track. The Vienna track deals with safety issues, and the Geneva track deals with security issues. So what we have in Vienna there's a series of principles have come up called the long-term sustainability guidelines, which look at how you avoid debris and how you sort of move in space without space traffic management, essentially. Okay. So these are the issues there. On the military side, there are two essentially. There are the fiercest arms race currently underway is in space. If you take out space capacities, you go back to being a 20th century military. It's a space capacity today that determines where you stand in terms of military ability. It's the strongest enabler today. So that produces a number of issues. I can come back to them in my next answer. But we are determined to be a part of the solution and not the problem. We want to work more with partners like Mariolin and the European Union, all other players in space, and also to take into account the interests of our growing private sector and our national space agency, ISRO. Thank you.
Ambassador, if I have a small follow-up. Essentially, the thing is that the perception seems to be that the UN could do more to perhaps catch up with the evolution and the breakthroughs in the tech. So the international space law has not really kept up pace when it comes to the evolution of breakthroughs in technologies in space. How effective is the UN in tracking all these breakthroughs which you mentioned about, a 90% drop in the cost launch and all these issues? How effective has the UN been as a forum for not just discussions on regulations, but also on tracking the tech as well?
Yes, you cannot consider space in isolation. It's one of the emerging technologies that's coming out, whether it's biotech or bioengineering and so on, artificial intelligence, robotics, cyber. Space is one of this clutch of emerging technologies that come in. All of them face regulatory challenges. The AI regulation. There's no way that you can anticipate what's going to come up, because you don't know whether autonomy is going to happen or whether when it's going to happen or what it looks like. Similarly, in space, it's very likely that we'll be it's a stated ambition. The U.S. government, for instance, its stated objective is colonization of the solar system. It's in one of their space policy directives. Okay, I mean how do you approach something like that? There have been attempts in the past to say designate space as a province of all humanity and so on. It's similar to what was done in the Antarctica Treaty when the concept of global commons was terrestrial. Okay, so we are facing challenges on a scale, I think, which is unprecedented in humanity. The only thing I can think of is of the papal bull of the 15th century, which divided the world into two, half for Spain and half for Portugal. Okay, so it's a challenge on that scale, and the UN is the best platform we have. The UN is only as good as the resources that are available to it, or what the member states bring to bear. It cannot outrun that.
So Anirudh, as Ambassador mentioned earlier on, space was something which was largely the sole preserver of the military activities a long time back. Lately we have seen some civilian aspects as well, but commercial considerations into space is a new thing altogether. How have you gone about building capabilities on that front in essentially what seems to be an area where there's been largely sovereign functioning. How has Digantara gone about sort of, approaching that?
Thank you, Konark, for having me here. So to answer the question around how has commercial sector evolved itself, and then the navigating of policies and building something in commercial space mainly happened because of the innovation, and the cost of launching to space has become much cheaper these days. So having said that, space was one sector that was mostly military in nature when it started. But then we have more than 70% satellites in orbit today that are purely commercial. Out of 13,000 active satellites at this point in time, more than 7,000 or even 8,000 are just commercial satellite players operating constellation of satellites. This change was not expected in the past. So the regulations did not change drastically from back then to now with all the innovation that is happening. So I see private sector to be more like a tech enabler and not a policy driver for a lot of things. So we just help towards accelerating a lot of technologies that are necessary for both civil and military applications. For instance, when we started Digantara, we started this company as a company that focuses on tracking objects in space and building a catalog that can support commercial space operations purely. But we didn't know the fact that military has a huge application around this when we started. Today, most of the work that we do, probably more than 80% that we do is for military, not for commercial use case, by tracking every single thing that is happening in orbit. That is also because of being in the right time at the right place. With all the geopolitics going around the world, space has become more imperative in terms of sovereignty, national infrastructure as well. So we support most military agencies today, balancing out on like at the policy level by helping them track adversary satellite activities, and also support a lot of military applications that can be derived out of space. The last part is the fact that space itself today is going towards becoming more and more commercial in nature. What was science fiction in the past is no more science fiction. We're talking about commercial human space flights and a lot of in-orbit activity, which means there is a need for infrastructure, just like we have one for aviation sector, which means somebody has to build for a solution to understand every single space activity. So that's something that we are focusing on today, because going further down, when we have around 60,000-70,000 satellites, this will be more important from the standpoint of operations. And like Ambassador Ray mentioned, there is no way you can draw boundaries in space. So everything is more like a common good, and whoever launches first gets that particular orbit. So it's called the orbit carrying capacity. So like given that fact, with GEO and LEO, there are different dynamics in nature. For GEO, we have more like an orbit carrying capacity concept. Inherently, people think space is infinite, but it is pretty much finite. The usable space is pretty much finite. So the number of satellites that are going up is significantly high. In just last 3 years, we've seen 6-fold increase in satellites, which means there needs to be an understanding where a public organization works very closely with private organization to accelerate the technology development to support the needs and the growth of this industry, and that's what we are supporting mostly.
How does that happen in practice on it? How do you actually go about working with the public organizations? What does that look like on the ground?
So when we started initially, it was very difficult to create awareness around something like space situational awareness, which was purely military. And like even at this point in time, a lot of countries view space situational awareness just to be military in nature. Like Europe today focuses more on civilian use cases of space, but America and Russia, China sees more military in nature. So when we work with these organizations, we balance out their needs. So for example, today for India, we're working with both civil and military use cases. With ISRO, we are focusing mostly on providing collision avoidance and tracking of objects. But for defense, it's mostly towards understanding adversary satellite activity. The same thing is happening in the US as well. US maintains the largest catalog today of space objects, but the catalog is not enough because it only tracks 30,000 objects, while we have more than 900,000 objects. So our role comes into picture in two levels. One, in ensuring we work with the policymakers, where they can regulate something like air traffic management, but for space, by having a single agency who is buying all this data and maintaining a catalog, providing service through this regulatory arm for all the satellite operators who are launching satellites to space. Just the best example is UK at this point in time. UK does this through their regulatory arm, where if any satellites are to be launched from UK, they provide all the services that are associated with space situational awareness through the policy agency or the regulatory arm, who predominantly purchases data from commercial companies like us. The same thing we've seen in other sectors like marine domain awareness, aviation sectors, where we have precedents from the past. We're following the same footprints, but here the only complexity is we can't draw that virtual borders as well, which is where we have to be global in nature. Even if we are a commercial company based out of India, we today operate in multiple countries, follow the rules of the local country that we are operating, and then providing services accordingly.
Ambassador Van Deelen, you mentioned in your answer the 5 key priorities of the EU when it comes to space security. So my question here is, what does that look like in practice in terms of the implementation? When we're talking about sort of application of those particular pillars, how do you go about engaging in different forums? So we have the UN, but we also have the open-ended working group as well on the prevention of arms race in outer space. So what does it look like when you're engaging at different forums? And my second part of the question is, where are the area of differences with different countries? Do different regions have different vantage points? Do they have different opinions on what space security looks like?
Okay, thanks for that question. I think the last one I need to think about a little bit, and I don't think it's a regional approach. It may be country-specific more than anything else, if there is. But in general, I have an idea that there's a very good perception across EU member states of the threats that we face and the need for action. And we see that by the very large support for the resolutions that were adopted in this respect in the first committee in New York for a couple of years now, and a process that we had on a previous open-ended working group on norms, rules and principles of responsible behavior in outer space, which included discussions between member states on threats and on different threat perceptions. And it included representatives from civil society and from the private sector. And this very inclusive dialogue, I think, is key to have if you want to get anything done. What it looks like otherwise, I think my good friend Anupam set it out very eloquently. What we do in Vienna and in Geneva, in Vienna focusing much more on safety, so on SST, space traffic management. Those are really important topics to get done. The EU looks more at regional approaches to space traffic management, but we very much agree that we need some sort of international framework in order to deal with who goes where at what time and the right of way, etc., that we have in all other areas of transportation. On the security side in Geneva, I very much meet with Anupam every time I'm there. We were both together in the first session of a new series of open-ended working groups that took place actually the past week in Geneva. We both came from there. And unfortunately, in that session, we really saw geopolitics play out. In 5 days, these diplomats did not manage to agree on an agenda even for this 4-year process. And that was because there was one country that was blocking the agenda. All other countries there were ready to agree. So the current geopolitical context makes it very difficult to come to agreements, especially to come to agreements fast. I think the way we did arms control in the last decades is not how we'll be able to do it now. And that means we're really looking for partners. So we do outreach when we go to these meetings. We speak to as many people as we can. both like-minded countries and not so like-minded countries. For diplomats, it's key to be in touch with everyone, to understand concerns, to listen to them, and to be able to explain our views and positions. But more focusedly, we have a number of dialogues on space and space security with a few key countries, and I'm really hoping India will be next. So far, we have one with the US and with Japan. With NATO, we have a space security dialogue with Korea and Australia. And for many other countries, we have space as an agenda item in broader political and security and defense dialogues. But I think this topic, given its importance, really merits a direct dialogue between our two countries. So that's why I'm here. I'm hoping we can set that up.
Thank you, Ambassador Van Dieren. Ambassador Ray, just a similar question for you as well. You mentioned that India has a knack for delivering at these multilateral fora. Can you give an example of how India has managed to bring together stakeholders, or what is the specific role India chooses to play in these multilateral fora?
Well, thank you. I mean, before I come to that, I think Mayolin, my good friend, has raised some very interesting issues. See, conceptually in space, you have to distinguish between arms control in space and regulation in space. Okay, the conversations often get confused. So what you do to prevent an arms race in space is related to, but is different from what you do to regulate what's happening in space. So a very good instance is raised by what Anirudh has said. The capacities that you use for space situational awareness are called space domain awareness when it comes to the military, but it's the same capacities. Okay, it's exactly the same thing. When you use it for military objectives, it's called space domain awareness. Now, when you come to this arms race bit of it, so let's for a moment keep aside the regulation part of it. The problems that we face sometimes intersect. For instance, if you have orbiting debris in space, and debris in lower Earth orbit, I think goes at the speed of something like 30,000 kilometers an hour. Even a fleck hits a satellite, it's gone. All right, so it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue. Amongst other things, it affects our space launch windows. Now, is this a security issue or is this a safety issue? Okay, we believe it's a safety issue, but there are countries which believe that it's a security issue. There's also, as I said, a fierce arms race underway in space. It's determined by how much you can spend, what your technological capacities are, what your ambitions are. And in this, in the effort to contain this arms race, there are two approaches. Essentially, there is one group of countries, principally China and Russia, which say that, this is a process born out of President Reagan's Star Wars initiative, which said that there should not be any weapons in space, that you should not weaponize space. Non-aggressive military uses of space is legal. Okay, so the use of space for military purposes which are non-aggressive in nature is legal. So now there are capacities coming up for space warfare or orbital warfare. Is that legal or is it not legal? These are, say, some of the questions that arise. There is another approach which is sort of championed by the United States, by UK, by the European Union, by many European countries, by Japan and others, which is called the responsible behaviors approach. Now, this is something which is another approach to arms control. It focuses on unintended escalation. One of the pillars of that is a ban on ASAT testing. We have participated in those conversations as well, like we participate in the conversations on the placement of weapons approach. We believe that the responsible behavior approach has its merits. So we have to work with everyone, and this is we are in for the long haul. Now, you talked about how India contributes. The space arms race is a difficult conversation, but let me take you to Vienna for a minute. The long-term sustainability guidelines, which is one of the most important multilateral products that has come up in space, was actually produced by a committee which India chaired. Okay, so we have a record in bringing about sort of multilateral consensus on these issues. I mean, the last point I'd like to make is that there's an American author called Michael Crippen who writes about space. So he says that whenever there's arms control happening, there are two conversations going on. One is actually about the weapons, the other is about the narrative. And if you are unable to compromise, then the next thing, then the fiercest battle is about who's to blame. All right. As a country like India, which we believe that we are a pole in a multipolar world, and I actually think we are, or we will be very soon. It is important for us not to get sort of taken in by this narrative battle. We believe that all approaches, including responsible behaviors, have its merits. We are glad that Mariolin is here, and we would like to work with them more in developing these ideas. Thank you.
Anirudh, so the private sector has clearly been at the forefront of developing some vital space technologies, right? But it has done so often in close coordination with the government as well. So the IDEX and the Ministry of Defense has a few challenges which they run and announce. So that's how one way the space sector has worked with the government as well. But at the same time, the same companies also work with, say, the US Space Force. So have you seen, or can you speak for the private sector in terms of, are there any challenges when it comes to working with two different set of governments, and how does that impact space security?
So firstly, I think space is global in nature. So as a sector itself, when you start a company within the space industry, you have to be global from day one. You can't be serving one particular market to become a billion-dollar company, because in this sector you also need a lot of funding to start with, which means you need to raise venture capital money or should be funded by the government. So the first step to this approach is to work closely with these defense challenges and few accelerated programs where you get that first foot into the door by working with these government agencies. Secondly, what we've done at Digantra is basically take a different approach where we started to solve for understanding how local regulations work and how can we solve for it locally than focusing on one single company in one particular part of the world. For instance, we have our company based in India, Singapore, and the US. For the US market, we use our US entity to solely focus towards DoD programs and serve for the US military market, because the regulatory framework is very different when it comes to space military aspect. So we have American citizens working in our US entity to solve for that problem of Indian company not being able to access US markets directly. That's one part. The second part is mostly on the civil application and the commercial use case side, where again, because the nature of the sector is such that the end customer for every satellite operator today in the world is mostly a government agency, which also brings commercial entities or commercial companies working with another country's company to follow the local government regulations around working with their own company than the outside company. So when we started Digantra, we didn't have a lot of access to the US. While it was easier to work with European companies, it was very difficult to work with the United States because of a lot of export control regulations and paperwork associated with that also impacts timeline on technology development. Having said that, US being the largest market within the space industry for any commercial company, it was very important for us to solve for having an entity there to be able to access a larger portion of the market. So that's how we went about approaching this particular problem. With that, a lot of private companies today, like although they are working on bridge programs like INDUSX, where you have India, US coming together, giving a challenge and working on it, it is still not happening at scale where a commercial company can rely on this totally. So it's just a foot into the door, but then you have to figure out yourself. So I personally think that the models that we have today, be it with ISET, INDUSX, is not a scalable model, and we've not seen that scale even with IDEX challenge yet, like at least within the space industry, because when you're doing something like this challenge, there needs to be a further roadmap around how can you change this from a challenge to a technology that is adapted for the military or for that particular end user. That adaptation is still a problem. So until we solve for that, you don't see anything happening at scale out of these programs, while you still have to be focused on becoming that one defense contractor who is focused towards solving bigger problems than these smaller challenges.
We have a few minutes left, so I think I have space for one more question. So Ambassador Van Deelen, this is to you. As I said at the beginning of this panel discussion, we're entering an era of astropolitics, highly contested, and a lot will depend on partnerships, alliances, and norms. The EU College of the Commissioners was in India recently, including the EU Commissioner for Defense and Space. They spoke about possibly doing something as a partnership with India. What would collaboration on space security with India look like in the future?
Yeah, indeed. The visit of the College of Commissioners, I think, was a key moment that really shows how the EU is interested in cooperating with India in many, many fields, but including space. And I think space was specifically mentioned at those discussions. I work at the EEAS, which is the diplomatic and defense arm of the EU. And we will cooperate very closely with what's called DG DEFIS of the Commission that runs the EU space program. And the strategy that I mentioned is something that is implemented jointly by the two of us. We would really see merit in coming jointly to India to sit down and to look across all these areas of work, how we can best cooperate with the Indian partners. So, as I mentioned, that would look like, as a start, a dialogue where we sit down, speak on many issues related to running space programs, but also to space security. And as you mentioned before, space is a global commons. So, as EU, we really believe that we need to solve the challenges we face jointly with other countries, and India would be an excellent partner for that. We also, the way the EU works, when we set up a partnership, it's a partnership. It's based on mutual interest. We're in there for the long haul. We work on it step by step. That is how we operate, and that is what we really like to do in India.
Thank you. With that, we're almost at the end of our time. I guess the main takeaway seems to be that, discussions are ongoing, space is evolving, the tech, the regulation, everything else. All I'll say is I'll close with watch this space. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Could you all please settle down for the next conversation? Thank you, dear panelists, for a truly insightful and nuanced conversation on space security norms and partnerships. Now our day moves in a different direction, a DPI direction. We now move into a conversation titled DPI and Climate Change. It's my honor to welcome to the stage Guilherme Alberto Almeida de Almeida, Program Director, Ministry of Management and Innovation in Public Services, Brazil. Sujit Nair, Chief Executive Officer and Co-founder, Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. The conversation will be moderated by Rahul Mathan, Partner, Trilegal. Please come to the stage. May I have the video, please? Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be back at GTS, and we're going to do a slightly different kind of a panel. The context of this panel was sort of set by Nandan in his remarks in passing when we opened GTS. He spoke briefly about, in his conversation with Yanka, about the idea of a DPI for climate. And I want to take a moment to put this in context. We have a very significant year in climate this year. It is the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. It is the time when countries of the world have to reaffirm their commitments, as it were, to climate. The way in which the Paris Agreement is designed to work is that countries have to ratchet up the seriousness and significance of their commitments to bringing down the temperature to within 1.5 degrees centigrade of pre-industrial levels. And this is the time when they have to reaffirm those commitments. Now, as it happens, it is also, as we've heard from the beginning of the day, I was just telling Rudy, this is a terribly depressing way to start the second day of GTS. But it is a fairly depressing time, and perhaps some of that rolls into climate as well. One of the requirements of climate is climate finance, and we know that one of the biggest contributors to that is walking out of the Paris Agreement. And so at this particular time, we have to reimagine, seriously reimagine, the way in which climate is done. Because the fact that temperatures are rising is absolutely obvious and evident. The fact that yesterday we had to shut down the party on the terrace because there was a dust storm that actually killed someone has to have some explanation. And we have to do something about it. And as we said in the early panel, when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. Once the egg is broken, you make an omelette, and we have to find a way to do that. And Brazil has the unenviable task of leading the world in that. And what's really remarkable about Brazil is that Brazil has chosen the opportunity to pivot. And I'm just going to read very briefly a submission that Brazil made in relation to mitigation. I'm just reading from there. They're saying, digital platforms can be used to promote sustainable practices, to facilitate the adoption of decentralized renewable energy systems, to share evidence-based information about climate change. Brazil has successful experiences and creative solutions involving DPI for forest protection and restoration. Brazil is convinced that including the topic of DPI in the discussion on forest protection and restoration presents an opportunity to reflect on the barriers that developing economies face in deploying, leveraging, and maintaining such solutions. This is live on the climate website, which means that a DPI for climate that Nandan briefly mentioned is actually already a reality in the conversation. We have a very short amount of time to cover this, and I've got two people who have rich experience in two ends of the spectrum. And I'm going to first turn to Guy, who is in the department that is responsible for the DPI for climate that was mentioned in what I just read out, and that is CAR, which is the Rural Agricultural Registry. So, Guy, I want you to just put it in context just remember that in this audience, I don't think very many people have seen what a rainforest is, certainly not a rainforest as large as the one that you have. I understand that your rainforest is so big that it can fit India in it. And if that is the size of the climate contribution, what exactly is the problem that CAR has set out to solve?
Well, thank you, Raul, and thanks Carnegie and Ministry of External Affairs for inviting us here. I guess what we are tackling in Brazil regularly, and particularly in the path to COP30, is how to implement preservation policies which are effective. And when you have such huge environmental assets such as the Amazon forest, and I just calculated, I think it's 1.5 India within the Brazilian portion of the Amazon rainforest. So you need to establish monitoring and protection institutions which encompass not only policies but also digital systems. Particularly in Brazil, and I think this is somehow different around the world, you have strong preservation policies. So every single landholder is supposed to preserve areas within their properties, namely riverbanks, top of hills, and so on, but also a mandatory percentage of their land should be either preserved or if it's not, it should be restored, right? It's recovered. So in order to monitor those commitments, we implemented more than 10 years ago the Rural Environmental Registry. So every single landowner is required to, in a geo-referenced manner, to disclose not only which are the boundaries for his, her, or their property, but also where are the preserved areas, which areas are used for mandatory preservation within their properties. So far, that leads up to 7.5 million more than 7.5 million registries so far, which cover nearly 80% of the Brazilian territory, which is probably the largest database on privately owned forests in the world. So it's a treasure trove of information for climate purposes, but only mentioning where forests are is not enough, right? You just mentioned that finance is crucial whenever we're leveraging incentives for preservation. So we are working and have been establishing several incentive mechanisms to make that preservation to happen. For instance, if you are applying for rural loan, if you want to finance your crops, you need to have such registry. And we have been working together with COS here to expedite that process by providing verifiable credentials in that context so that we can expeditely make this rural loans process even more important and expedite. Also, you need to have validated information on the territory. So, and we've been working together as well with NORAD on that to make sure that we have not only accurate information, but we can use DPIs for georeferencing systems so that could be used abroad. And finally, if you manage to have preserved land, people who have surpluses, they can trade those surpluses. Or if you have preserved areas through time, you're either entitled to payment for environmental services, and we've been working with UNDP for that, or it could even become a ledger for carbon markets. So you mentioned at the beginning that there might be a DPI for climate. I would say, amend that by saying that there are DPIs for climate. So the idea of bundling together several DPI-powered approaches to that can help us to enforce that basic commitment which Brazil has and that might become global, like private property should also have environmental commitments on mitigation and preservation, and then support financial mechanisms to make that to come true. I think this is a initial vision for reference.
It's amazing. We started talking about DPI, but really the more we dig, we find many countries have adopted this particular approach to a lot of problems. And I think this is one of the biggest problems. I think the beautiful thing about what you're doing and continuing to do, particularly with verifiable credentials, is that this is likely to feed into, now the European Union has a requirement that exported crops must be deforestation free. And a verifiable credential could really work to certify that.
That's the elegance of a DPI approach, right? Whenever the system is in place, it can serve multiple purposes. It can serve traceability, it can serve carbon markets, financing, protecting forests, monitoring, AI powering reflections on climate. We were discussing Open AgriNet earlier on, and it totally connects with the information which might be there. So when we realize that connecting the dots is the way forward, we are on our way to COP30.
And look, if we're saying it's going to cost 5 trillion to cure the economy, we really don't have 5 trillion. But with this, we could perhaps cure it for much, much less. And really, that's the idea of what DPI does. It unlocks the abundance that is already there within society.
And more than that, I think collaboration is crucial to that. I just mentioned a few partners around here, and there are more and more, much more people have been discussing the role and importance of DPI for climate. And working together towards a common goal is part of the equation, because as I heard, we need exponential solutions for exponential problems, right?
We need exponential solutions. So if we need exponential solutions, just one solution is not good enough. I'm going to turn to Sujit, because we also have another really complicated problem, and that is the fact that our energy system was fixed, as Nandan said, a century and something ago, and it hasn't changed since then. But right now, we're in a very different world where there is renewable solutions that we require, and we need to find a way to fit that in. Once again, we need to do that really efficiently, because cost, once again, needs to be in mind. So, Sujit, you have worked on such a solution. Can you do a DG for dummies? Because just assume we're all dummies, and we've got to just understand it from basic principles up.
Sure. No, thanks, Rahul. In the interest of time, I'll save the thank yous for later. But I'm a journalist, so I'm also learning on energy, because this is an idea that came to us from the larger community around the work we do, talking about why aren't you doing anything in energy? And that's when I realized, to your point, we are perhaps in the most unprecedented time when it comes to electricity. People are calling it the new age of electricity. Fixing the grid, decarbonizing the grid, one of the most complex machines built on the planet, especially when you have three important trends shaping the future of the grid. One is rapid decarbonization of the industries, and the concrete pathway of decarbonization of industry has been electrification. Electrification of transportation, refrigeration of industry buildings and plants and all of that. So one is this very clearly a demand surge that is hitting the grid because of the electrification that's happening. Second is this whole idea of everybody can be an energy producer today, because the cost of solar and the cost of batteries, the cost curve declines that we have seen is so unprecedented that it's well within reach to have at a population scale deployment of behind the meter, rooftop solar and batteries. And that's happening at such an unprecedented space, so that you're creating a whole lot of a decentralized energy resources. Conventionally the utility grid has been unidirectional, where you have one big generation plant, and then there's a transmission corridor, and then you have the distribution, and then most of us were like passive customers behind the meter paying the bills. That's the only time the utilities recognize that we exist, to actually we being active consumers and prosumers. So this whole decentralization that's happening. So these three big trends, electrification, decentralization, and the third part, which is the natural digitizations that are happening. And every electric EV car is also a software-driven vehicle. Your thermostats are becoming software controlled. All your systems that take care of your ACs and others are getting software controlled. So there's a natural digitization that's happening. Because of this, we are in a situation where there is a very, very clear case for why the only way to do this at a sustainable scale, at a population scale, and make this this acceleration faster, is to unify these diverse discrete efforts. So what we are seeing is, of course, there are these big grid companies, utilities, and all trying to decarbonize and infuse more renewables into the grid. But parallelly, there is this whole edge grid that's happening behind the meter with all these distributed resources like the batteries and solars and electric cars and everything. They seem to be literally two separate ecosystems not talking to each other. The grid has no visibility behind the meter. Today, when we are talking about solarization of homes, and Prime Minister announced 10 million rooftop solars, the grid guys are getting worried, saying that I don't know when is this solar energy generation is being pushed back into the grid, if I have excess energy, to which feeder is it connected to? There's absolutely no observability. And the whole of grid in the last 100 odd years have been working on this very tight supply-demand balance. And everything is based on a scheduled generation and management. And we have lost that control, we have lost that observability to manage this supply-demand balance when so many millions of micro-energy resources are plugging into the grid, either supplying energy or drawing energy or pushing back energy from a battery. So it creates a situation where you have an edge grid actually making the big grid stumble and fall under its own weight. So to unify all of this, the DPI thinking is essential to this idea of how do we unify this discrete diverse energy resources in the edge grid and the big grid come together. And one of the things we have noticed when we are looking at the digitization efforts is literally we are building solutions in silos. Of course, there's an effort on virtual power plants and battery systems connected to the clouds. Everything, all the digitization is happening in silos. It's quite literally like as if we are building a road for every car. And this is the DPI thinking of saying, if we have one general purpose digital energy grid as an infrastructure that takes care of all of this come together on a unified energy rail and make them all come together, I think it'll create a whole new opportunity for not just grid governance and grid management in wake of these new stress that is coming to the grid, but also create a whole new innovation opportunities both in the private sector and public sector. I'll just give you a couple of examples and I'll hand it back to Rahul. One, today we are having conversations about how a floor mill operator in a village who's probably have a rooftop solar and battery to sort of have its own energy security when the grid is unstable can actually rent out virtually the battery for somebody else to use it to store and retrieve energy. So we are creating what is called as a decentralized battery energy storage systems where even a floor mill operator can participate in a formal energy economy that is taking shape. Similarly, a EV charging operator, a charging point operator, if he's connecting to the grid, is probably getting a brown or a black grid because the grid is not green yet. But specifically for that charging station, he can source energy through this digital energy grid infrastructure to buy it from a remote battery operator and have an electronic transaction to sort of prove that his socket can get green energy because he's actually having an electronic transaction on the protocol that is kind of enabling digital grid to make that happen. So these new ways of imagining possibilities is something unprecedented. So things like peer-to-peer energy, some of the states in India are looking at enabling consumers to trade energy between themselves at a sub-kilowatt level, a sub-megawatt level. And those are some things that can happen if you have common rails. So how do you bring all of them together and accelerate this whole decarbonization effort where you have the businesses, the utilities, governments and regulators all coming together, and all that required one unified digital infrastructure. And that's essentially the idea of digital energy grid. It's again a collection of various set of standards and protocols making this happen. And we already have some live implementations going. We do about 65 megawatt hours of transactions every day. On a live implementation of that grid in India, we have 50 companies forming an alliance to make that happen. And we have these transactions happening and digital energy grid is actually live and happening. And now there's a conversation we are taking globally and inviting conversations from multiple countries and of course a conversation with Brazil and the COP30 team as well. But that's essentially what DEG is.
Sujit, I just want to double down on how you're doing it. Just to make it a little more relatable, you are using the Beacon protocol behind some of this. I think we are all familiar with the Beacon protocol from the ONDC perspective.
Yeah.
But can you very simply, because we don't have time, just simply explain how the protocol is helping unify all of these things?
Yeah. So essentially, if you look at similar to what we're seeing in ONDC and with energy, you would have an energy producer at one place. It could be a big energy generation company or a local prosumer who has some excess energy on the rooftop. And there's an energy consumer. And if you have millions of them, if they want to have a direct conversation with them, instead of waiting for one big platform to bring everybody together at a population scale, which may not happen, if you want to create a natural conversation between them, Beacon protocol comes in the way of making this consumer-provider interaction on any economic resource happen. In case of digital energy grid, you're talking about energy as a resource. You're also talking about energy-related assets like battery, renting, EV charging infrastructure, all of them being accessible. So Beacon protocol as a general purpose transaction value exchange protocol is kind of the spine on which the digital energy grid infrastructure is being envisioned, because Beacon protocol, little did we realize that we'll use it for energy because it's built as a general purpose consumer provider value exchange protocol as a bunch of specifications, which is what is firing your ONDC and now some of those implementations on DEG.
So this has been a really short teaser, as it were, of how DPI thinking can be applied to just two areas of the climate conversation, both successfully and actually being implemented. We have a long way to go, but a very short time in which to do it. And we're hoping that this has been sort of a teaser for all of you to start thinking about this and seeing how we can apply this sort of thinking to various other areas. I mean, immediately we know loss and damage is a huge issue. When there's a climate disaster, how do we get money to people who really need it? And there's a DPI for that already. It's the G2P payments infrastructure. And so there are many different ways in which we can apply this, and we're hoping that by changing the conversation from what it has been for the last decade to this new way of unlocking abundance, we can actually show how DPI thinking can change the way in which we're having climate conversations. That's all we have to say. We hope by next year we'll have a lot more to say. I would like you all to join me in thanking both Guy and Sujit for doing all of this in such a short time.
Thank you for a timely conversation on DPI and climate change. Up next, we have a short talk titled DPI in Action. It's my privilege to welcome to the stage Mr. Nuruddin Boutayeb, President, Moroccan Foundation for the Promotion of Preschool Education. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want first to thank Carnegie India for inviting me to GTS 2025, and I'm honored to deliver this keynote speech in this session, DPI in Action. It will be around Morocco and its approach to digital public infrastructure. Morocco has positioned itself as an African pioneer in the development of digital public infrastructure, adopting an approach inspired by the Indian model while adapting it to national specificities. This collaboration with India, initiated nearly 8 years ago, has enabled the implementation of 2 structuring projects and that are gradually transforming Moroccan's digital landscape. First, the Digital Identification System, RNP-RSU. As early as 2013, Morocco began reflecting on the modernization of its social aid system, which was until then characterized by a universal approach, as with cooking gas, or targeted but often imperfect methods. The objective was to adopt a more precise targeting system, minimizing human bias, and enable robust identification and authentication of beneficiaries. In November 2017, a Moroccan mission traveled to India to study the Aadhaar system successfully deployed nationwide. During a meeting with Mr. Nandan Linikani, the godfather of the Aadhaar system, a proposal for collaboration emerged to develop a modern identification core in the form of a digital public good. This collaboration led to the signing of an MOU between Morocco and India in 2018, with making the Kingdom of Morocco the first country to integrate its identification system, RNP, around MOSIP. This pioneering initiative has since been adopted over 20 countries, more than 20 countries. The RMP was successfully tested in 2 pilot regions at the end of 2021, being deployed nationwide the following year. Today, this system has enabled the enrollment of more than 20 million people, 22 million people, the integration of 4.3 million households into the unified social register, the allocation of free medical coverage to over than 11 million beneficiaries. New targeted and aid programs are currently under study and can be deployed thanks to the RNP RSU infrastructure, thereby strengthening the Moroccan social protection system. The second project is the FMTPS LTMS Maharat platform to transform education through digital technology. During a visit to Bangalore in May 2024, the considerable progress made by India in the field of DPI since 2017 was noted. The DPI approach, which succeeded the India Stack concept, was particularly impressive for its results in the education sector with the Diksha platform. As president of the Moroccan Foundation of Preschool Education, FMPS, decision was made to develop an LTMS, a learning teaching management system platform based on the Sunbird Ed environment. This platform aims to develop the skills of the foundation's 24,000 educators, serve as a large-scale proof of concept for the Department of Education and Vocational Training, and offer a potentially replicable model in other West African countries. An MOU was signed between FMPS and IT Bangalore COS, and an MVP is in the last stage of development with the support of COS, Google Cloud, Protean Tech, Deloitte, and the financial contribution of Co-Develop. This MVP will advantageously replace the e-learning solution previously used in SaaS mode, which was considered expensive and insufficiently adapted to specific needs. The future LTMS Maharats means skills in Arabic and sounds a little bit Hindi. Will offer a structured training path allowing each educator to take an initial placement test, follow a path marked by skills and sub-skills, progress gradually from the grade of junior educator to expert educator. Designed to evolve constantly thanks to the richness of the Sunbird building blocks, this platform can be adapted to other professions by defining skills frameworks and developing specific modules. What next? Despite a relatively short preparation time, a conference was organized last January in Rabat in partnership with Google Cloud, the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University, and COS. This event brought together around 100 decision makers and IT managers from administration and private company. The conference offered an introduction to DPI approach, largely unknown in Morocco, especially recorded address by Mr. Nandan Likani, presentation of the Indian DPI journey by Mr. Ramesh, CEO of COS, a presentation on Diksha by Mr. Shankar Marwada, a presentation of DPI in a box by Google Cloud, and was followed by a lengthy question and answer session demonstrating the interest generated. In parallel with the conference, meeting was organized with three ministers, Agriculture, Commerce, and Employment, to present the DPI approach and especially the open network approach developed in India through ONDC, Honest, and Open Agri Network. Google Cloud has committed to conducting POC, proof of concept, in these three sectors, with the precise modality yet to be defined. Another action was the Sunbird Ed environment used for the Maharat platform was also presented during two workshops to 4 universities, and the objective is to launch a Sunbird Academy project to develop Moroccan expertise in this technology, thereby broadening the approach of the open source and DPG approach. UM6P, the university, has also expressed strong interest in developing a center of excellence in DPI after the center of excellence in Mozip that is already already developed, and meetings are scheduled to move forward with this project. Perspective and next steps: we have to strengthen foundational DPI to make citizen interaction increasingly presenceless, cashless, and paperless. We have already the ID layer, but we have to work on to accelerate the digital payment adoption in Morocco, and we can be inspired by Indian and also Brazilian experience. Establishment of secure data exchange via QR codes and DigiLocker. We have to develop sectorial DPI beyond fundamental infrastructure. Deep sectorial DPI could be developed in areas such as education and health, and the open network approach is particularly promising for including people excluded from the formal system, facilitating the transition from informal to formal economy, and reducing costs associated with multiple intermediaries. And finally, we intend to create an institutional vehicle to maintain momentum and ensure strong political support by the creation of a dedicated NGO, DPI for Africa, which is currently under discussion. The objective is to establish this structure before the end of this year with the support of Moroccan company and, I hope, Indian partners. As a conclusion, the DPG for DPI approach represents a particularly advantageous solution for digital transformation. More economical, elimination of license fees and reuse of proven solution. Faster, accelerated deployment thanks to the pre-built and interoperable components. more efficient, guaranteed scalability, interoperability, inclusivity, and digital sovereignty. This initiative aligns perfectly with Morocco's digital strategy for 2030, which aims to make the country the leading digital economy in Africa and to be among the top 50 in the United Nations E-Government Development Index. The large-scale development of DPI project will also foster public-private partnership and stimulate innovation. By adopting the DPG for DPI approach, Morocco is affirming its position as a leader in digital transformation in Africa while developing inclusive solutions tailored to its specific need. But in my opinion, the important thing is to remember that technical and funding matters aren't the problem. It is rather to find enough champions, risk-takers, and strong expertise in change management to conduct DPI project to success. I hope that after giving you an idea of what we did, what we are doing now, and what we'll do next, I will have the opportunity to talk about the how aspects that are more important. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for that stage-setting talk. I would request you to please take a seat on the stage, as this is a good segue to the next panel, DPI in action. It's my privilege to welcome to the stage Anish Kumar, Advisor, DPI-3, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Isaac Vasquez Montilla, Director of Public Innovation, Ministry of Public Administration, Dominican Republic, Gertrude Kadumbo, Chief Executive Officer and Board Secretary, National Switch Limited, Malawi, Rosemary Kisembo, Chief Executive Officer, National Identification and Registration Authority, Uganda, Farooq Yusuf Yabo, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, Nigeria, Noureddin Butayeb, sir, you're already here. Moderating the session is Shankar Maruwada, CEO and co-founder Ekstep. Can we have the video, please?
Thank you, Mr. Butayeb. That was a very inspiring talk. Welcome, distinguished panelists and audience, to this crucial conversation on DPI in action. I have witnessed firsthand the transformative impact of DPI at the scale of India, especially when it's designed with inclusion at its core, both from my experience at Aadhaar and also as CEO of Ekstep Foundation that works at the intersection of technology and transformation. That is why I'm excited today to have this distinguished panelists, each representing a diverse DPI journey. They'll be sharing their journeys, their lessons, and their way forward as they are all undergoing a DPI-enabled transformation. DPI represents shared digital systems that are secure, interoperable, and support inclusive delivery of public and private services across society. India's journey demonstrates that DPI can compress generational change into years, achieving in 9 years in financial inclusion what would otherwise have taken close to 50 years. The G20 consensus on DPI under India's presidency established that DPIs are essential for equitable development, particularly in the global south. We are also witnessing a historic shift where the global south is pioneering innovative digital transformation, often leapfrogging traditional systems. The creation of a global DPI repository now showcases 54 DPIs from 16 countries, providing a knowledge base for nations embarking on their digital journeys. DPI as a service, or DaaS, which was announced in the last Carnegie GTS, is enabling countries like Brazil, Malawi, Trinidad and Tobago to rapidly deploy solutions without sacrificing quality, security, or sovereignty. Despite impressive gains, there are persistent challenges in DPI adoption that need to be addressed. What concrete lessons can we extract from successful DPI implementations around the world? How can these experiences inform digital transformation efforts worldwide? What practical frameworks and policy frameworks can help nations with limited resources or technical capacity to implement DPI effectively? These are some of the questions we will be discussing. I look forward to our panelists sharing insights from their experiences as we explore how DPI can become a tool for inclusive development across the globe. Rosemary, if I may start with you, could you please elaborate on Uganda's DPI journey with digital identity? It contributed to governance efficiency and financial inclusion while addressing challenges like low birth and death registration rates. What's been your experience?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carnegie India, for inviting me. I'm always excited to be here. I cannot talk about our journey without talking about Triple ITB Bangalore. I want to thank Professor Rajagopalan and the team, Krish and everybody for giving us the experience that we have had. Our journey with DPI began with a need. What was our need? We are a brownfield, meaning that we had an identity solution, but we had a challenge in 3 key areas. 1, interoperability. 2, scalability. 3, flexibility, or the ability to change at the rate at which our legal system was changing. And 4, expanse. I'll discuss each briefly. So, our vendor product was very good. It worked very well. It was secure. But every time we needed another desktop or another tool to add to our list of tools, would need a new license. Now, furthermore, it had been made 10 years ago, and each time we needed to change something, we'd have to call a team, and they would have to guide us through this. And in essence, we were really locked in. For change, we needed somebody. For every aspect of expansion or improvement or continuous, additions, we needed to have a vendor on board. It was not sustainable. It was not a sustainable model. So enter MOSIP. Our journey with MOSIP began really 2 years ago. And we only signed a contract 1 year ago. 2 years ago, we began the discussion. 1 year ago, we signed a contract with what they call an integrator. And our journey has been exciting. We started out with a small team, and it was an experiment I took, of 12 people who had very little understanding of technology. We interested them in the platform, said, get onto the platform, download it, it's free, you can access it, and begin the customization journey to the Registration of Persons Act of Uganda. It was a slow journey of 4 months, but by 5 months, people had gotten a grip of what they needed to do, and the customization journey began. So by the time we had an integrator on board, we were giving the integrator code to work with. From the DPG we had downloaded, we'd improved it to align with our law, and now we were giving them, please start from here. So for me, that's the first key success, I would say, in our journey. The other issue, what would I improve? Documentation of that DPG. Now, the other thing I would like to highlight, the standardization and information security and inclusion aspects of the DPG that we worked with. Consent became a matter of discussion. It's implemented almost in every aspect of the MOSIP platform that we work with. So in essence, the importance of privacy and protection of personal data became a topic that we were all aware of. It was in our previous product, I must say, but now it came into everybody's space. We had to learn with it and grow with it. What are the other things that I'm curious and glad to know that this DAS has taken off, DPI as a service. Our issue with that has been jurisdictional. Data jurisdiction across or out of our country. I'm sure there's a solution for it. But our journey has been exciting because of the interoperability, the scalability, the flexibility, and the standardization and information security that the product, that the DPG that we were presented with has helped us. It is also going to, we are at piloting stage, but we can already see people plugging into the DPI to expand and strengthen fintechs. So even with the existing fintechs in the economy, the information security and the standard at which the DPG came at is driving, is driving technology up. Now, you don't just program; you have to program at a certain standard. So there is a chance for Africa. We have the smallest T, 10%. So in essence, you can a partnership in this area will really strengthen not just us but everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Mr. Farouk, Nigeria has gone beyond identity into payment systems, and you've been leveraging DPI to transform civil services into efficient, citizen-centric institutions. Can you also tell us about your plans for data exchanges on your journey forward?
Okay, thank you very much, Shankar. And please allow me to first start by thanking the Indian government and indeed their partners for inviting me to this very important and auspicious event. There's been a lot of learning in the last 2-3 days. Now, that said, I would like to put this in context. Nigeria happens to be the most populous country on the African continent, with about 250 million people, out of which 70% is under the age of 35, meaning that the median age is about 19. And so we are in that space where we have a lot of useful population that needs to be engaged. Secondly, it's also important to point to the fact that our economy has been the biggest economy on the continent, and so our GDP requires that we have very robust solutions. And so the government of Nigeria has taken a deliberate position in terms of how do we move forward. And the way it has been done is to go by diversification of our economy across all sectors, to create new job opportunities, to be economically empowering the vast majority of the people that are coming. And one convenient way to do that is through technology. Now, our journey to DPI, I would say, has been a long one. Probably have started before we know anything about DPI. I think back 10, 15 years back, many Nigerian ministries, departments, and agencies, and even private sector have already deployed different kind of digital solutions. But this digital solution has always been in silos, isolated, lacking any very clear standards. Now, with the coming of the idea of DPI, which simply we see as capability to be able to use digital tools to create new economic opportunities in a very inclusive and far-reaching way across time and space. Now, with all of this, the question for us is, where do we stand when it comes to what has already been done in terms of our legacy assets and what we will be achieving if we adopt the concept of DPI as a model. And so it took the government leadership, especially within the digital economy sector, which I am working, almost the whole of 2023 and some part of 2024 to go around the world to engage from India itself to Europe, to China, to the US. And what we found was that the concept of DPI has two extremes. The first extreme being adopted by smaller countries in terms of numbers, where you have almost what you can call a straitjacket approach to integration and deployment of digital systems. On the other extreme is siloed systems, like you will find in Nigeria and in many other countries, including big countries. And in between are countries that have been able to synchronize and define rails like ID systems, like payment systems and data exchanges to be able to pull in the other strings and have a wider integrated system. And so what we have done lately is to try and place ourselves. And incidentally, we happen to fall at the last extreme, where you have all kind of digital solutions, but that are siloed. And so the question is, if we are going to go into the DPI space or DPI race, where do we start? And so a starting point for us in recent times has been to develop a strategic framework which we see as a long-term visionary and strategic decision that is going to help us to create a digital capability that will be able to provide solutions across economic, social, political, and even environmental problems. And in order to do this, we need to have a well-crafted long-term strategy. And that was what we did. Early in 2014, we launched the Nigeria's digital strategy, which has 5 pillars. The first pillar is knowledge, where we are currently running the biggest capacity building program in the world. That is the 3MTT program, where we intend to train 3 million young Nigerians in all aspects of technology. And this has been on in the last year. We've so far trained over 200,000 young people. The next item is for us defining the policy framework, and that is how the DPI concept came about. As a policy, as a strategy, the government decides that we will build a digital infrastructure leveraging on already existing assets and expanding from that. And of course, we also quickly recognize that for you to do this, you need infrastructure. The foundational infrastructure hasn't been there. As we speak now, we are running a project that is going to install 90,000 kilometers of fiber across all nook and crannies of the country, expanding our broadband connectivity to 95% by the year 2030. This project is already on, leveraging on the already 40,000 kilometers of fiber optics that are in place. And of course, we are looking at innovation, entrepreneurship, and capital as the fourth pillar, with trade being the last one. And so, as we speak, we have narrowed the DPI vision as a people-oriented vision, relying solely on live events. So the current framework that we have come up with arising from the strategy is what you call DPI framework for live event support. So we recognize that the whole concept is to make people happy. And how do you do that? We define from the beginning of the journey, which is a birth, from our birth to our death, there are a number of issues that we deal with regularly. And these are the areas where we want DPI to help liberate and ensure that we are moving forward. So in essence, as we speak, Nigeria already has a digital ID system with over 100 million people already fully identified through the NIM system. We have also, over the years, as part of the silo program, had the interbank exchange system, which is an instantaneous payment system that is already connecting both fintechs and all other sectors. So in essence, we already have the foundational building blocks for DPI, and as we speak, we are working to develop the data exchange, which is going to provide the integration across all the various legacy assets that are there. And this is going to place Nigeria within the next couple of months in a place where we had already leapfrogged in terms of our economic resilience, inclusivity, and sovereignty. And so we see DPI not as a product to import, but rather as a solution to be built, managed, and cascade into problem-solving, happiness creation tools for our citizens. Thank you very much.
Ms. Gertrude, in Malawi, you have been experimenting with DPI as a service. You have evaluated it and you've decided to go ahead with it. Can you please share your experiences on that and inform the audience how such models can be scaled to other developing countries? Why is it relevant to other developing countries with limited resources?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Carnegie as well as the Ministry of External Affairs in India for the opportunity to come here, participate as well as share our experiences and also gain some deeper insights in various areas, not only DPI. Before I answer that question, I just want to give a brief background on DPI in Malawi. And I'll start with where we started. So DPI journey, that was way before we knew that this is called DPI. We started in 2010 to be specific. And that started because of, I'll start with digital identification, pressure coming from the banking sector, especially because of some legal frameworks that have been enacted in the country. In 2006, the country enacted the AML as well as CFT policy. And this put pressure on the financial sector when it came to compliance. The reason being that Malawi had no national ID. So we had several documentation that we used to identify citizens. Some were more traditional in the sense that apart from passports as well as driver's license, we used all sorts of things, letters from village headmen, letters from academic institutions or employers and so forth. That put a lot of pressure on the banking sector when it came to verifying those identities and so forth. And then in 2010, two things happened. There were two legal frameworks that were enacted in the country. One of them was the National Registration Law, and the second was a revision of the Banking Act of 1989. these reforms were being undertaken, one for the Banking Act because of the digital transformation that was happening in the payment sector. One of them, the bringing in non-banking payment service providers like the mobile money operators. And the second was for the National Registration Bureau was now to put structures in place that oversee as well as coordinate the implementation of the digital identification system. And in 2017, that's when the digital identification system went live in Malawi. By the end of the year, Malawi had registered and issued IDs for almost 100%. And in addition to that, because Malawi did not have any legacy identity system, we leapfrogged in issuing digital IDs in the country. Now, coming to the DPI block that is responsible for payments, we implemented what we call a national switch that promotes inclusive as well as interoperable digital payments in the country. Inclusive in the sense that in terms of participation, both commercial banks as well as non-banks payment service providers are integrated to the national switch. So we do have all the commercial banks, all the mobile money operators, microfinancing institutions, savings and credit cooperatives, as well as fintechs integrated to the national switch. This happened in 2015. Now, go to the digital public infrastructure that is specific for trusted data exchange. This is still work in progress. But what happened is in 2016, there was a law that was also passed. This is the Electronic Transaction and Cybersecurity Law. And that law provided a legal framework under which our government came and established what we call an e-government unit under the Ministry of Information and Digitalization. And that work commenced with a lot of challenges. Until now, we are facing those challenges. Now, coming to your question, to your submission that Malawi is working on DPI as a service. This came in because of the challenges, some of the challenges that I'm going to mention. And one of them is that when it comes to digitalizing government departments, ministries, as well as agencies of government, each one of them, they're working in silos. There's a lot of fragmentation in the economy. And that is putting a lot of pressure in terms of how we progress, as well as in terms of financial resources and sustainability of the various systems that are being put in place. The second is to do with, these are solutions that are procured and they don't use open source standards. And for that reason, we have had challenges in terms of us achieving the data exchange because those systems are not interoperable and don't have capabilities to interoperate. And the other issue is to do with technical capabilities challenges. Really, I think that's how we found ourselves in a position where we have all these systems being implemented by different MDAs, although we have an e-government unit in government. In 2023, we started engaging with CDPI, and we also attended the IIITB in Bangalore, and that was actually eye-opening for us because most of the issues that we're struggling with, they became so apparent to us. We got to understand that there are solutions out there that we can use. So for that reason, we have been experimenting. We signed a letter of intent with CDPI, and we went ahead, started looking at all these frameworks, especially for data exchange. The fact that from 2016, when that law was enacted, not much has been achieved so far. Of course, the government under e-government has gone ahead to implement a shared platform for all the government services and so forth, and also a billing system for the government services. And that also is supposed to integrate to the national switch for interoperability, specifically for payments. But then because of the issues that I'm talking about, to say most of these systems are not interoperable, this is a challenge to us. And that's why we are considering digital DPI as a service. Now, in terms of some of the challenges in DPI, how we are overcoming them, the issue to do with sustainability and so forth, in as much as DPI has been institutionalized in Malawi, but you find that the issues to do with sustainability in terms of financing and then long-term kind of sustainability, sustaining the operations and all that, it's a challenge, because whether it's digital identification, whether it's inclusive and interoperable payments, these are solutions that the country got from outside Malawi, and any change, as my colleagues have pointed out, to say any functionality that you want to add on it, any change that you want to introduce and all that, it comes at a cost. And the issues are compounded because that dependency on vendors, then we haven't equipped our own people with the right technical skills for them to be able to develop systems as well as to maintain those systems. So there is heavy reliance on the vendors that are supplying those solutions. So DAS for us is the right solution. In terms of sustainability, for the digital payment systems that are interoperable in Malawi, there is public and private partnership that is in place. In as much as the solution was implemented with funding from the government, they sourced that funding from the World Bank Group. Management of the operations, or implementation and management of the operations, it's done by the private sector. So that introduces these operations are self-sustaining, as well as the efficiencies that are needed. And the reason why this was done is there were some trust issues from the private sector when government was implementing these DPIs. And one of them, especially on the payment space, they did not trust government to implement as well as to operate them. And then because of those engagements and consultations with the private sector, it was decided that that would be run by the private sector, as well as ownership was passed on to the private sector. And for that reason, the national switch is more of a self-sustaining, those are self-sustaining operations. We haven't really done the same for the other DPI rails. That is, of course, because of state issues and all security issues and all that. I really don't see that happening. But ongoing with all this interoperability and all that, because when we are introducing interoperability or new use cases on the digital identification system, one of them is the account to the ID account mappers and all that. There's that collaboration between the financial sector as well as the bureau that is responsible for civil registration. And we also are leveraging on the existing infrastructure. We're currently working with government departments to digitize the disbursement of social funds, as well as to digitize revenue collections, that is both tax and non-tax revenue collections, by leveraging the interoperable and or inclusive payment DPI. And so that has tended to bring everyone together for us to work together. Slowly we are improving the trust issues that we have. But the technical capabilities as well as DAS is from working with CDPI in India. It is indeed assisting us, one, in resolving issues to do with technical capabilities, two, in implementing the trusted data exchange system in a more faster way than before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Isaac, Mr. Farooq talked about a DPI framework which was around making people happy, a cycle from birth to death. I was fascinated when we were talking about how DR has implemented a human-centered approach to DPI. I found that fascinating. Could you please share Dominican Republic's journey and dive into this human-centered approach to digital transformation?
Yes, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for the introduction. In the name of the Ministry of Public Administration in the DR and the Dominican Republic people, thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you to Carnegie India and the government of India. It is a huge honor to be here with you guys. I'm really excited because this is like a dream come true. In first place, because this is my first time in India, and since I was a little kid, it was like a dream for me to visit this beautiful country and meet these beautiful people. And in second place, because I'm pretty sure that here in this Global Technology Summit, some of the most brightest minds are present here trying to build a better future for our communities. So I need to be realistic. Probably I'm not the best guru in the DPI's ecosystem, but I'm assure you guys that with my experience in the public sector in the Dominican Republic, I have a strong and a fresh view, perspective of how those systems can integrate with the government strategic to the benefit, to a true benefit for our people. For 14 years, I've been working with the government and the public sector as a policy maker in health, in public systems, in education, and for the past 5 years with management, all the administrative consultation in the government, and also with the digital transformation and innovation. And I found some in common for those 14 years of experience. And it's the need to move the in-from-person public services to digital quickly platform for the benefit of our people. And when we're talking about digital services, when we're talking about digital platform, must be focused on people's need. And when we're talking about the digital transformation, I think that the foundation of those goals, of course, are the DPIs, the DPGs, the building blocks, and the innovation. That's why in the Dominican Republic, we believe that digital public infrastructure is not just a technical foundation. It is the enabler of everything we want to achieve to a modern governance. In our view, DPI makes three essential contributions. First, it allows governments to design and deliver services that are faster and more efficient. Second, it makes the interoperability possible, breaking silos and promoting collaboration across all the institutions in the states. And third, it helps build trust through transparency, inclusion, and accountability. And these are not abstract goals. They are practicals. They are measurable and necessary. In my country, we see digital public infrastructure not only as a set of technologies, but as a path to improve lives. Our vision, guys, is simple and practice. Build a government that works better for everyone, with services that are accessible, efficient, but above all, human-centered. And for that, we are currently working on several key areas. The first, we are promoting a zero bureaucracy approach. a model where citizens no longer have to navigate into complex processes, visit multiple offices, or deal with unnecessary paperwork. We want to simplify services, eliminate friction, and deliver public value quickly and transparently through digital channels. Second, we are improving interoperability. Among all government institutions to enable data sharing in a safe, of course, and ethical way, reduce bureaucracy, and provide faster public services. But we know, guys, that technology alone is not enough. That is why, as Director of Innovation in my country, we put the digital inclusion as the center of our strategy. We want to make sure that no one is left behind, not because of age, not because of gender, not because of income or location. And to do this, we are focusing on digital literacy programs, partnerships with local communities, and the design of a simple, friendly platform that truly responds to the people's needs. Finally, I want to emphasize that for us, the digital transformation is not just a technical challenge. People, the digital transformation, it is a social and an ethical mission for our countries. It is about restoring trust in the public institution, empowering citizens, and building a stronger democracy through transparency and participation. And we need to take the success case, for example, with the digital transformation in Singapore. I had to bring the case, for example, of the open source in Estonia, and of course here in India. Then, in the present, they bring, for example, the DPI plus the AI as the bridge from the next 1 billion of Indian people. That's amazing. That's why in the Dominican Republic we are still learning. And we are open to still learning. We are still growing. But we are deeply committed that walking this path together with the global community towards a more open, inclusive, and resilient digital future is the best way for all. And that's why, and finally, for first time ever in the Dominican Republic, we are coordinating the first DPI Summit Dominican Republic with the support of the CDPI, the support of the Inter-American Development Bank, and the United Nations through the UNDP. So, you are welcome to visit the Caribe in the Dominican Republic and share your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a passionate definition and a description of what you do in DR. Mr. Anish, India is acknowledged as a global leader, and DPI is strategic to India's long-term growth and becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047. But you're also advising the ministry on the many ways of India helping global DPI adoption. Can you talk of why is DPI strategic to India and what India is thinking of helping global DPI adoption?
Thank you, sir. And very good afternoon to everyone present here. So, sir, it all started with way back in 2023 when India assumed the G20 presidency. So when we were about to set the agenda for G20 presidency, our top leadership decided that this time the agenda of G20 will not be only India's agenda, but it will be the agenda of the Global South. So we held a Global South Summit, Voice of Global South Summit, and from there this DPI things came, that India should do something to promulgate DPIs for the global adoption. Sir, you rightly said in the G20 outcome, we created, the G20 forum created a global repository for the DPIs things. Social impact fund was also announced, and that the work is still in progress. But apart from that, since then we have signed MOU with 20 countries in the field of digital cooperation. And it's not only about signing the MOU with the countries, we are actually working on that front with many countries. We have very active engagement with countries like, I will say, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, to our neighborhood countries, towards our east with Fiji, PNG, towards west with Trinidad, Tobago. And when I say active engagements, these engagements are in terms of sharing our experience with them, training and capacity building needs, and in few cases helping the countries in actual adoption of those DPIs. And I will also say it's not about the countries with whom India has signed MOU. We are not only working there, we are also working with the countries where the MOU has not been signed. For example, we are working with Uganda, we are working with Peru, we are working with Namibia, and many other countries. So MOU is just a bilateral means, but it is not limited to the MOUs signed. And again, when we partner with other countries, it's not about only the three basic DPIs, the ID layer, the payment layer, and the data exchange layer. There are demands from the countries for the very specific, sector-specific DPIs or DPGs. For example, countries are needing India health stacks, they are also talking about our agri stack, they are talking about our education stack. So, so I can say there is not only interest, but there is a willingness to adopt the basic DPIs, that is ID, payment and data exchange there, but again there are interest in adopting the sector-specific DPIs as well. So there is I will like to say there is a certain way in which we approach our global partners for the global promulgation of DPIs. And the same ethos was also stated by our co-panelist also. So we feel that it's not about the technology. It's not that the open source interoperable software codes and protocol you put in a freely downloadable website, countries will go and download it and adopt the DPI. So it's not the case. There are certain elements, certain prerequisites for that. Country has to be e-ready to a certain threshold. There has to be a political will. Probably there will be a training and capacity building needs for the line ministry or the institutions which will champion the DPI in that particular country. And so the country needs to draw the legal, the policy and regulatory boundary conditions so that they can create. So like one of my co-panelists said, it's not about the importing the product, it's about developing the product without reinventing the wheels. So country needs to draw the political, legal and regulatory boundary conditions within which the DPI will work so that the digital space is not monopolized by certain players and the field is level for big and smaller private players to flourish their innovations. So our approach with our partner country that we provide a whole solution. We first share our experience with them, our digital journey with them so that the political class is ready. We also provide the training and capacity building needs for the institutions or the line ministry which will champion the DPI so that they feel confident. And once these set of things are ready, then we work with our partner countries to draw the legal requirements, regulatory requirements with them so that the DPI is developed as per their needs under their own sovereign control. And after that the technology transfer things comes. And if there is a need for further training, further hand-holding, we also are willing to provide the initial hand-holding so that the DPI journey continues. I will also say that it doesn't mean that we are only working on a bilateral forum, country to country. We are also working with a trilateral forum where two countries coming together helping the third country. We are also working on the multilateral forum. And within India, we are adopting a whole of society approach. Where we are working with our think tanks, we are working with our institutions who are developing DPIs, we are working with the private players so that very innovative solutions that are coming can be exposed to the global south or to the global world. So we are taking a whole of society approach where all the relevant stakeholders are coming together and helping the world to adopt and to go for a DPI journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Anish. That was fascinating. A whole of society approach to societal transformation. Mr. Butaib, your keynote, you talked about the two big projects that you have personally led in Morocco, identity and now education. One is a foundational DPI, the other is a sectoral DPI. Can you please go into some elements of the how, maybe focusing on why collaboration was important, focusing on change management, and for the recent FMPS project, how you put together a unique funding model, a collaborative funding model. If you could, and into these three and any other hows, I'm curious to understand the secret sauce of how Morocco pioneered both its important DPI journeys.
Thank you, Chankar. Effectively, each country, I think, has its own path to address this question of DPI approach or going on using DPG for DPI. And it has its own history, its own digitization pathway. And I think that first, the first thing to do is to look around and to, for example, Morocco is too near from Europe. So we are focused US and Europe. And we have to see elsewhere. India is the best example. And we have to study carefully this Indian experience, not only by reading things, but come here and visit and see what is working and go on the field and see how it is lived by people. And we did that in 2017, and it was very, very rich experience. And I think that we have to, there is something that is important to say, is that Indian subcontinent is very similar to African continent. There are developing challenges that are similar. Many dialects, many ethnies, a lot of problems, young people. So we can learn from each other, and you are front ahead, and you have to learn from what, and try to see, and we have to begin where we are the most comfortable and where the need is the most urgent. And it could be foundational DPI, it could be sectorial DPI, like Mr. Anish said, education or health or something like that, or it could be to solve some problem. For example, your approach to ONDC through open network. It speaks to me because you can use this approach to help the informal population to go to formal environment very slightly, by helping them to have this. But in every project, we'll face difficulties, and that's why we have to have a strong change management approach. And besides the political will, we'll have always opposition. For example, when we began building the ID system, we have an existing system which is built on an identity card. So it's normal. Why building another ID system? Because we have this one. So there is sort of difficulties to go through that. The regulation, the data protection agency also, and in that case, I think that, and in all other projects, our colleague Isaac from Dominican Republic is in the administration for 15 years. I spent 18 years in the administration of Ethereum, and for every project it's the same thing. We have to be patient, extremely patient. We have to never give up. Even we can stop and just let it until we have the green light from somewhere to restart again. We have to unite energies by explaining, by reformulating, reformulating vision, priorities, action, ideas, until you have enough people with you. Because if you are alone, it's not you have to bring the points of view together closer to see how to do that. For example, now I'm trying to give this point of view closer between the ID system and the other system. And there are opportunities to do that. So why having two ID systems if we can have one strongest one? And you have always to negotiate to go forward. You can't just say, it's my point of view and I have to go there. So, but not without forgetting the ultimate goal. Because you have a goal and you have to try to use tactics and And as I said, funding and technical aspects are not the most important. The most important is to do, to look for champions, to build favorable systems. Because this DPI approach is a long process and it's a slow process. We can't go very fast because we will perhaps find us alone, no one with us. So we have to, and we have to be a risk taker. I'm glad that my colleague from Uganda is working now with Mozip. When we signed the MOU, there is no line code on Mozip written, but we trust because we see what was done with Aadhaar. So it was just a matter to rewrite properly, better the code of Mozip and to integrate around it. So we'll not begin from scratch. We have a brownfield, so we have to see how to take this brownfield and to push it toward the DPI approach with this all its principle: reuse, transparency, interoperability, openness, scalability, data privacy by design, etc., etc. And that's what we did with the RNP system. And that we are doing now with LTMS. LTMS approach began with the fact that I came again and I saw what you did with Diksha in every state with different languages, with different challenges. So, and I understood also, but under Diksha there is this Sunbird environment with these building blocks that we can use to build something like a Lego. So we have not to be a very technical guy, but we have to understand what could be used by using these technological things. And now I am now the president of a foundation in preschool, a huge NGO. I have 24,000 educators around the country. And this 24,000, the quality and all the challenge is that we have quality educators. And so training, it's by training and evaluation. On training aspects, it couldn't be presential all the time. It will be too costly. So you have to go to e-learning training, to virtual training. But it could be just top to bottom, like we do now with this traditional e-learning platform. But our aim through this LTMS platform is to position the educator, where is he? And after that, to build with him the pathway, to give him the module, the quizzes, and to help him to go from this first step, junior educator, to more experimented one. And we did it with the help of COS, but I think that the project was very interesting, and we had the pleasure to have with us Google Cloud and its partner, Proteantech, Sanketika, and also we were pleased to have a contribution financial of develop. But I think that it's just the first step. we have to build an environment. I'm working on having with us universities to master this sunbird environment, to use it as sandbox, to do something with that. Because as we did for Mozip, now there is a MOU between IIIT Bangalore and the university, Moroccan University, to be the center of excellence on Mozip. When we signed the first MOU, I asked to have maintenance for 5 years. The 5 years is now ending, and it will be taken by the UM6P University for the next years. We'll do the same for the DPI. We are now looking for a center of excellence of DPI. So building the ecosystem will take time, but it's the only way to do that. And looking for champions and risk takers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butaib. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We had a fascinating conversation. One quick, if all of you could think and talk for 10 seconds, if there's one thing you could ask of this audience, and this audience comprises countries, technology companies, philanthropists and funders, universities, multilateral organizations, who have all been witnessing your journey and listening to your wisdom. If there's one thing that you want to ask of them, if we can just think in 1 or 2 sentences, what is that one thing you would ask of this audience? Maybe Mr. Butaib, and we'll go this way. Yeah. Just one thing. What would that be?
To help in capacity building.
Capacity building. Thank you. Ms. Gertrude?
Thanks a lot. For me, it's the technology companies. As you have heard that in Malawi, we have offshore solutions. Please do try to open up your sources so that you can give us capabilities to develop on the foundation, to continue developing on the existing foundational systems that we have implemented. Thank you.
Ms. Rosemary?
Thank you very much. This is the case for Africa. There are 1.17 billion young people. Even if that was $1 from each, you have $1.17 billion waiting. Furthermore, they are young. All those 1.17 billion are below the age of 30. They are young. They have an opportunity to be good actors or bad actors. The world is connected, whether we want it or not. We are connected through tariffs, through trade, through payments. So one bad actor on the African continent can bring down global trade, even before tariffs. So I think the opportunity is, let us hold hands with Africa. We have shown our adaptability rate is high. We have shown our learning rate is high. Venture capitalists, hedge funders, welcome to Africa. Technologists, India, you've held hands with us. Grow deeper with us. 52 countries are opportunities to build health stacks, biology stacks, pharmaceutical stacks, and an opportunity to take over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosemary.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the one word I'd like to leave us with is the fact that DPI is a means to an end. And we should all search ourselves as to what is our end, what do we want to achieve with it. It's a journey. We're in different levels in this journey. We need to find out where everyone is so that we can engage him at the level he is. Thank you.
Mr. Isaac?
Human-centered. Human-centered, I believe, yes. The inclusion and simplicity. The digital transformation must serve to the people, not to the system. So that's what we always ask. For example, is the service easy to use? Does it make your life better for the citizens? This is easy to use. Does it make your life better and easier? So we believe that when we put all the efforts into the human needs of course, we are going to have better results.
Thank you. That's again inspiring. Keep humans at the center, not system. Mr. Anish.
So I will say DPI are public enabled but private provisioned platforms. So private sector institutions should come forward, build innovative solutions on top of the DPI platform, duly incorporate the new technologies like blockchain, AIs, quantum safe computes, and push the country towards a very thriving and inclusive digital economy.
Thank you. I would have loved to summarize, but I don't think I can put it better than what the distinguished panelists did. A big thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience for a patient listening. I know we are between you and lunch, but most importantly, a big thank you to Carnegie for bringing all of us together and having this very crucial topic on the agenda. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, dear speakers, for a wide-ranging discussion on DPI in action. We now break for lunch. Please rejoin us in the ballroom by 2:20 p.m. so that we can begin with the afternoon sessions. We have a lot to look forward to on data governance, DPI, and artificial intelligence. Could I request the young ambassadors to please come towards the stage? Thank you.
आते हैं, वहाँ से नक्सली भाग जाते हैं, कहे कि उसमें हमारा फोर्स का कब्जा हो जाता है और नियत निलानार योजना के माध्यम से वहाँ पर सरकार की योजनाओं को हम लोग पहुँचा पाते हैं। वहाँ सड़क, बिजली, पानी, वहाँ का राशन कार्ड, आयुष्मान कार्ड, वहाँ के जो स्कूल बंद पड़े हैं उसको खोल रहे हैं, अस्पताल खोल रहे हैं, तो ये सब हो रहा है। तो इससे एक बहुत बड़ा विश्वास जनता का सरकार के साथ कायम हुआ है। पहले ऐसा था कि